Hello everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of An American in Thailand, airing every Friday. This program is broadcast to you from Ratchamakon University of Technology, Peranakan, and it will come to you in two parts. For the first part, we'll introduce a certain topic about being an American here living in Thailand. Could be about food, culture, travel, politics, lifestyle, whatever. We'll then take a break, and in the second part of the program, we'll get into examples and more specifics of whatever topic we're talking about. All right, let's get to the program. Welcome, everyone. My name is Gary Gray, and I am your host for An American in Thailand. Obviously, I am an American, and I'm here in Thailand. I have been living here for about 8.5 years, working at Ratchamakon University of Technology, Peranakan. I'm an English teacher here, mostly. Sometimes I teach science, but mostly an English teacher. And I think I've been here long enough to pretty much know about most cultural issues here. I'm still learning, always learning new things. So I'm not 100%, so I apologize if I say anything wrong, but mostly I think I have a pretty good idea of Thai culture. And so for this program, I like to talk about kind of the differences or things we have in common or anything like that. So what we're going to talk about today is something kind of interesting, and it's about the relationship historically and currently about the U.S. and Thai military, because they've been very varied over the last 100 years. So, for example, we'll start right off the bat. Right off the bat means right away. That's an American saying. You think of baseball. Baseball's a big sport in America. You hit the ball. That starts the play in baseball. So off the bat, boom, the ball starts, and you start the play. So right off the bat means right at the beginning. So, right off the bat, let's talk about World War II. So why did Thailand side with Japan? That doesn't seem great, right? Maybe not the best thing to think about in Thai history. I'm going to talk about in the second part of the program why Japan isn't really the good guys. I mean, you never know in war, you know. Whoever wins the war writes the history. We're going to talk about that with Vietnam as well, and why that's not necessarily always a good thing. So, was Japan really the bad guy? But I think probably, as I'm going to explain to you, yeah, they probably were. And Thailand's such a nice country. The land of smiles. Why do we side with Japan during World War II? Well, I think there are 3 points to talk about with that. Number one, Japan pretty much forced them. Japan said, side with us or we're going to invade you. And Thailand is very proud of the fact that they have never been colonized. Now, as I'm going to explain in point number 2, that's not entirely true. I'm sorry. I hope most Thai people won't get upset with me by that when I point this out, but it's not entirely true. But Thai people are definitely sensitive to that. Because they believe they've never been colonized. Myanmar was colonized by Britain. Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam were colonized by France. They've all been colonized. Thailand? No. Malaysia, colonized by Britain. Now, this has nothing to do with America, right? Yeah, America's pretty... I don't want to make America sound like they're so wonderful. We have colonized some places, but not many. We've also gotten involved way too much in trying to control other people's politics. America is not innocent. I'm not arguing that America has been perfect. No. But as far as colonization, and in Southeast Asia, we've almost done nothing. That's not been America's thing in Southeast Asia. Philippines is the one place where we were kind of in charge briefly. Even then, we were what we call a protectorate. So we were supposedly there to help them. Some of them didn't think so, so it probably still wasn't a good thing. If the people live there don't like it, well, you're probably doing the wrong thing. So again, I'm not really defending it, even though I'm American. But theoretically, it was supposed to be a good thing when we were in the Philippines. I'm not sure it was, but in theory. All right, so but other than the Philippines, we really haven't done much as far as colonization in Southeast Asia. So what about this? So why would Thailand side with Japan? All right, so there are three reasons why I think, actually the third reason that you're going to hear is that they didn't. So, it's not even entirely why they would. But we have 3 points to make. So I'm not even going to give 3 reasons, because the third reason isn't even a reason why they did it. The third reason is that they didn't. So it's really 3 explanations. So let's talk about this. So why did Thailand side with Japan? Number 1, Japan basically forced them to. Japan said, you can side with us or we will invade you. And we will take you over. And you kind of saw that in the West, like out near Kanchanaburi. There's a famous movie called The Bridge Over the River Kwai, which is right outside of Kanchanaburi. Yeah, the Japanese basically said, either you go along with us or we're just gonna kill you all. So the Japanese kind of forced Thailand into that. So I'm not sure that's really Thailand's fault. Number 2, and this is maybe the biggest reason, because this is kind of what started it, is that the Thai people at the time hated France. Why? Well, this gets into the whole colonization thing, and this is where I hope I don't upset my Thai viewers, because Thai people are very proud of the fact that they were never colonized. Well, you were. France colonized northern Thailand. And part of the agreement with France is that Thailand had to give up a lot of their land in the north to Laos, which at the time was still controlled by France. Laos was a French colony. That's why Lao bread, if you go to Laos, Lao bread is basically a French baguette. It's the same thing. Laos still, even today, has a lot of French culture. If you go to the government buildings and you look at their signs, they are translated. Most places in the world translate into English because that's the most common language that people speak. Now, in Laos, the translation under the Lao name is in French. They still have French influence in Laos. And that land was taken away from Thailand. Thailand never controlled all of Laos. Laos was always its own country. Well, I say always. I mean, maybe not 1,000 years ago, but I mean, in recent history, Laos always existed. It was always its own country. But there was dispute over some of that land between France and Thailand. And France took it. So, when we went into World War II, Thailand hated France. France was with the Allies, with the U.S. side. The U.S. side was the U.S., Britain, France, countries like that. Okay? And so that's another reason. That's reason number 2. It was the colonization. Thailand, I'm sorry, actually was colonized. I know a lot of Thai people love to think they were never colonized. They were. It's just not what is currently Thailand, because you had to give up that land because of France. There was part of Laos. What is now Laos? That was Thai. And it is no more, because it was colonized by France, and France stole it from Thailand. And so it is now, even still today, part of Laos. All right, and the number 3 reason, I told you this one was one of that where it's actually, no, they didn't. Yeah. They kind of didn't really side with Japan. Thailand didn't. They knew Japan was bad. And in fact, near the end of the war, there was a resistance movement, kind of an anti-government movement that actually took over. They won. They took over the Thai government. And they actually sided with the West. And throughout the war, they had always kind of been helping the West, because the West was very close by. We had military bases, for example, in Malaysia. And so a lot of Thai people were telling the U.S. and the British, the Japanese are here, they're doing this is what's going on. They were giving us information. So I'm not really sure how much on the Japanese side the Thai were in World War II. They were kind of forced into it. They kind of didn't go along with it. The only reason they were kind of okay with it was the whole French connection. They weren't happy with the French. Japan was fighting against the French. Actually, Japan wasn't directly fighting against the French, but the Germans were fighting against the French, and the Germans and the Japanese were allied together. So, kinda. And so that's why Thailand sided with Japan in World War II. And now, let's jump to the Vietnam War. So why would Thailand help the U.S.? After all, the U.S. was allied with France during that war. Now all of a sudden you're on France's side? Okay, a couple of things about that. First of all, France kind of left that war early, which was... that makes me furious about the whole war. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the second half. But at that time, communism was a real threat. I will remind you that Pol Pot in Cambodia was communist, and that was a complete disaster. And I think everyone knew that. Now, that was kind of after the Vietnam War, so you might say, well, yeah, that's not really related. But the whole thing is kind of related. The North Vietnamese were helped out by China. Pol Pot was helped out by Russia. So... the whole thing was about communism expanding into Southeast Asia. And so Thailand saw that threat, and so they sided with the U.S. Now, we lost in Vietnam, but I don't know, maybe at least we slowed it down, I don't know. Because Thailand isn't communist yet. We'll talk about that in the second part of the program. But Thailand is not communist, so maybe it was a little bit successful. Maybe we caused enough damage to it, to the communist expansion, that we slowed it down. But one thing that's interesting is that the propaganda still continues. I know, I've been to Vietnam. The Vietnamese call it the War of American, they call it the American War, the War of American Aggression, whatever. What's interesting is the Americans didn't even start the war. It was the French that started the war. America kind of came in later. That's a whole convoluted process, and it's horrible that it even ended up that way, but whatever. But it was a civil war. It wasn't the Americans didn't start it. It wasn't. It was the North Vietnamese versus the South Vietnamese. It's a civil war. It wasn't some American aggressive war. Now, did the Americans behave well? No, there were a lot of atrocities. It was terrible. I do not support the war. We should not have been involved. No. Thailand should not have been involved. If America was not involved, Thailand would not have been involved. No, we should not have been involved. Let them fight their own war. It was a civil war. Let them fight it themselves. Let them decide for themselves. Let the Vietnamese people decide what they want. So I'm not saying I supported the war. But the idea that it was an American war, which is what the Vietnamese people say today, is just silly. The South Vietnamese were aided by the Americans and Thailand. The North Vietnamese were aided by China. It was China versus America. It was basically what we call a proxy war. That's when two countries use another country to fight their battles. That's what it was. It was China versus America. The Americans were not the aggressors. If anything, the Chinese probably were, because they were kind of coming in from the north and moving down. The South were just... they were just there. That's what it was. That was the government. That was Saigon. That's where the main government was. That was Vietnam. If anything, the invaders, the people doing the attacking, were the Chinese. That's who invaded Vietnam, not the Americans. The Americans were just there protecting the government. Now, again, I'm not even saying that was right. No. The Vietnam government was corrupt. It was a terrible government. No, we probably shouldn't have been there. Let the Vietnamese fight it out themselves. So no, we probably should not have been there. But the idea that it was like a war of American aggression, the Americans were there killing all the Vietnamese. No. No. And so, yes, Thailand sided with America. And the reason is understandable. Again, you had, like I talked about, you had Pol Pot in Cambodia. And now granted, that was kind of late in the Vietnam War and mostly after the Vietnam War even. But you could still see it coming, the whole transition. There was this invasion into Southeast Asia of this communist rule by both Russia, because Russia was primarily who was helping Cambodia, and China, because they were primarily who was helping the North Vietnamese. And so Thailand was fighting against that. So, yeah, Thailand and the U.S. were allies. And as I mentioned, the propaganda continues in Vietnam. All right, so we're going to talk about a little more detail of this, and it's a little, and it seems like I'm taking sides here. I'm not really. It is more confusing than this. And we're going to talk about some of those kind of things in the second half of the program. So let's go ahead and take a break now. So let's take a quick break. Welcome back. All right, so we're talking about the U.S. and the Thai military and how we were involved in World War II, Vietnam, and all that stuff. And even today, it's really weird because, U.S., China are always fighting with one another. Well, right now, Thailand buys almost all of their ships from China. And all of their planes for their Air Force from the U.S. So it's really weird. So let's talk about this because it's not really an easy issue. It really isn't. It really isn't. World War II really shows the complexities of the whole idea. Where Thailand sided with Japan, but not really, kinda, just because they're angry at the French. But at the end of the war, they sided with the West when the opposition forces took over and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's really confusing. So let's use a current example, just for me to show you how complex it is. And this is an example that doesn't even include Thailand. It kind of includes the U.S. because we do side with one of these, but not directly. It doesn't directly include the U.S. The example I want to give you is China and Taiwan, just to show you how complex it is and how much you really need to think about international relations when you think about military issues. So the big question is Taiwan part of China? You can answer this either way. Here's the answer: yes. It always has been. I mean, maybe not always. I mean, you can go back 50,000 years, probably not. But in modern history, yeah, Taiwan's part of China. Yeah, always has been. Even the U.S., who is an ally of Taiwan, is in favor of reunification, unify, come together. In other words, Thailand should rejoin China. The only reason we oppose China on this is because of we don't want to see a lot of people killed. China is often threatening Taiwan. We don't want to see them taken over by military force. We want to see them work something out, come to some diplomatic agreement. It's the only reason we side with Taiwan, defend Taiwan. We're allies of Taiwan. Yes, we will defend them militarily. We will fight against China to defend Taiwan, but only because we don't want to see China invading them. If they can come to some agreement, okay. And we want to see Taiwan's freedoms kept, because Taiwan is much more free in terms of free press, things like that, than China is. And China actually violated a lot of those agreements that they had with Britain when Britain handed over Hong Kong. China was supposed to keep a lot of the freedoms in Hong Kong, but then they made excuses like, oh, this person did that, and so that's against the law, so we're going to take away that freedom. So they violated a lot of their agreements. And so now the U.S. doesn't trust China to do that with Taiwan, so now we're even more strongly in favor of Taiwan. But it's not that we disagree with reunification. Even we agree with that. Even we, who oppose China, think, okay, yeah, they should be together. So there's definitely an argument that China and Taiwan should be together. Taiwan's part of China, yes. But there's also a very valid argument against that. What a lot of people don't remember, because it's so long ago historically, it's like 60, 70, 80 years ago, I think about 70, but it's about 60, 70, or 80 years ago, a lot of people don't remember that this was a civil war in China. The current government in Taiwan is descended from, it comes from the same government that had been in charge of all of China. This is the old government still ruling in Taiwan. So mainland China has not defeated them in this civil war. They haven't won the war. So who's in charge? You can very easily make the argument that the Taiwanese government is a very legitimate, sovereign state. Now, even the U.S., who opposes China, doesn't agree with that. But it's a fair argument. It's a fair argument. They've not been defeated from a war that began 70 years ago. It's the same government. It's the old government from the old China. And the new Chinese government fought a violent civil war to kill them all and take over. They failed. They failed. They haven't taken them over in Vietnam. Sorry, I was going to say Vietnam again. They haven't taken them over in Taiwan. They failed. The old government of China still exists. It's in Taiwan. That's the government in Taiwan. That is the legitimate government of Taiwan, of China. That can be argued. You can make an argument that the communist government in China is the invalid government. They never won their war. They haven't taken over Taiwan. Now, the bad part about that is that's almost encouraging them to do war with Taiwan, which I don't support either. It's encouraging them to do that because, okay, if that's a legitimate government, and then, and the reason that the Chinese government is not totally in control is because they need to knock them out. So that's almost encouraging them to go in there and start war, which I'm not encouraging. So I'm not encouraging that. My point is, it's complicated. So we saw that. Now, if we bring that back to Thailand and the U.S., we saw that complication in World War II. Like, why would Thailand side with the bad guys? I mean, they were objectively bad guys. I mean, everyone wants to, define things from their own perspective. So maybe because I'm American, of course, I'm going to say the Japanese were the bad guys. No, they really were. When you saw some of the stuff they did, I encourage you to go look up Nanking in China and what the Chinese did there. Yeah, and I'm not saying America's perfect. You can find similar examples in Vietnam. The U.S. did some terrible things, but we actually tried to hold our people accountable for that, which is different as well. There were people that got charged criminally with some of their actions in Vietnam. So yeah, Japan is objectively the bad guy in World War II. So why do you side with the bad guy? Again, it's complicated. It's complicated. So much stuff going on. Japan was really pressuring Thailand. You had Thailand's anger towards France. It's tricky. I mean, Japan was clearly the bad guys. Like I said, some of the stuff they were doing in China. Also, Japan and Germany were taking land. The West wasn't trying to take land. They were trying to protect land. France was not expanding their territory. The U.S. was not expanding their territory. Britain was not expanding their territory. Germany was. Japan was. They were the bad guys, trying to steal land. But it's complicated. complicated. Like I said, Japan threatened Thailand. Thailand didn't like France. It's complicated. Same thing with the Vietnam War. You ended up with Thailand siding with France in that war. I mean, sort of. France kind of pulled out pretty early. So there wasn't a lot of, like, Thai forces working with French forces. No. There was maybe a little of that early on, but there wasn't much. Because France kind of ran away early. They decided they didn't want to do it. So it was mostly just Thailand fighting alongside the U.S. And Thailand actually didn't do a lot of the actual fighting. It was more kind of support roles. And it was more with the U.S., not with France. But still, technically, France was on the same side. So Thailand was technically joining France in that war. Crazy, right? So anyway, it's always complicated, and my biggest concern is going forward. You know, U.S. foreign policy right now is pretty bad because of who we have in charge. I mean, you could argue maybe Trump did do some help in solving, it's still not solved, but cooling down the Cambodia-Thai conflict we have going on right now. But generally, the U.S. is kind of going the wrong way. You know, they side with Putin in Ukraine, that whole battle. We're going along with the bad guys, basically. Again, sometimes I don't like to say bad guys, good guys, because, you know, it depends on political opinions. But occasionally, it's clear. Japan, Germany, bad guys in World War II. Right now, Putin, bad guy, and America's siding with him. So America's siding with the wrong people, and you see Trump like criticizing NATO all the time, so speaking badly about our allies, so it's tough. And meanwhile, China continues to try to expand its influence here in Southeast Asia. You see that right now with the high-speed rail they're putting in. China's supporting most of that. And you think that's a good thing, right? Yeah, it's nice to have a high-speed rail. Yeah, it is a good thing. Sure, yes, it is. But you think they're doing that just because they're nice? Just because they like Thailand? Of course not. Let's not be silly. They're doing that to gain influence. And they are being increasingly belligerent, which means like threatening, bad, angry, mean, evil. You see that with Taiwan. They're increasing their threats against Taiwan. You see that in the South China Sea. They're increasing their threats there. They've even gotten Vietnam, who, again, China basically supported in the Vietnam War. They've even gotten Vietnam to get angry at them because they're trying to take Vietnam's land. So, yeah, they're not friendly. They're not a friendly actor here. They're not helping Thailand because they love Thailand. Now, I'm not saying the U.S. would do the same. I mean, especially with Trump in charge, who the only person he's interested in is himself. So, yeah. But it's difficult. So I'm worried about the situation going forward because I see China trying to redo what's happening in the 1960s and 1970s with the increased communist threat into Southeast Asia. They're trying to expand their influence. They're threatening Taiwan. They're in the South Chinese Sea. They're trying to increase their influence on Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. They're just basically trying to take over the region, essentially. Maybe some people think that's good because they offer some help, like with the rail system. But I would remind you what happened in the 1960s and 1970s, like Pol Pot in Cambodia. That's what happened when they tried to expand. Again, I'm not even trying to take sides. But believe it or not, even though it sounds like I'm talking bad about China, I actually love China. I've been to China many times. I have many good friends in China. My ex is from China, who I'm still friends with and I still talk to, still help him out with some stuff. I got no problems with China, personally. No. So even though it sounds like maybe I'm kind of, communism, China, no. I'm just concerned. I'm just concerned about where we're going. China seems to be trying to influence things too much. We saw that before in the 1960s and 1970s. It did not go well for Southeast Asia. You had a war in Vietnam. You had a massacre in Cambodia. Let's not do that again. So I'm hoping that Thailand and the U.S. can increase their cooperation, get along better. I'm not confident that will happen, given what the U.S. is currently doing, which is not very good. But I'm hoping. I'm hoping folks here in Thailand will see the concern that I have. I don't even want to talk too harshly about it, because like I said, I actually don't hate China. I actually have been there many times. I love China. I don't want to talk too badly about it, but there is a concern. There is a concern with what they're doing. It's like the 1960s and 1970s rising again. So let's just be smart. Let's try to be careful. Let's be smart about our future here in Thailand. All right. That got very serious. Okay, that's it for today's episode. Don't be too serious, It's okay. It's okay. Thailand and U.S. still have good relations. That's good. All right, so thank you for joining us for today's An American in Thailand program. And let me reach out to any young people out there who may be considering going to our university in the future, Ratchamakon, University of Technology, Peranakan. We've got a great university here, and we are expanding. We have an international program that we are starting up. So consider us for your future university studies. All right, please stay with us and tune back in next week for another interesting episode. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.